A lot of people love Dragon Ball Super episode 69, but a lot of people really didn't, and I think a big part of the reason why some folks didn't like the episode is because it was filled with characters and jokes and humor that they didn't understand because, unfortunately, Dr. Slump has never been localized or translated for the English-speaking world, at least not the anime. The manga definitely was, with the exception of a movie 5-pack, which you can pick up on rightstuff.com or Amazon. There is no Dr. Slump, not dubbed or subbed, so I thought I'd make this video to kind of explain some of the jokes and fill you guys in on all of the Easter eggs from Dragon Ball Super episode 69. So sit back and relax, and I'll tell you everything you need to know about Dr. Slump, the characters, and everything that you may have missed from episode 69.
Greetings everyone, Cell here. Subscribe to this perfect channel and follow Geekdom on the social media platforms. That will be all.
One thing I want to reiterate over and over again is that the Dr. Slump world is completely different from the Dragon Ball world. It's almost like a completely different dimension, so don't even look at it as a different universe or timeline or anything. It's just, it exists outside of the regular Dragon Ball, I guess, omniverse or multiverse. So these wacky crossovers are really not supposed to make any sense. Now, I want to start out with the very beginning of the episode where we see the sun. Now, the sun in Dr. Slump, and not just in Dr. Slump, but also in the Adventures of Tongpu, which I covered in another video a few months ago, another Toriyama manga before Dragon Ball, the sun has a face and has hands and whatnot. You can sometimes see him brushing his teeth too. Fun fact, the sun is actually voiced by Toshio Furukawa, who also does the voice of Piccolo. You'll see a lot of voice actors intermingle between Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball, not just because they're very well-known voice actors, but also because Toriyama works tend to kind of do that. And again, I wish we had this series out on DVD or Blu-ray in, North America, Canada, so we can actually buy this thing and we could all enjoy Toriyama's works, but that's not something we can do. Now, up next, I want to talk about Mr. Pig. Mr. Pig is no relation to Oolong. His job is pretty much to announce what time it is in Penguin Village. In this episode of Super, he appeared to tell us that Arale will be coming to Dragon Ball Super. And what surprised me is that we actually heard the Dr. Slump intro music called Why World, which translates to Noisy World. And this song was only used for the first 197 episodes of Slump and the last 4 episodes, but it's the most well-known Dr. Slump theme song. Naturally, if you watched the original Dragon Ball crossover with Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball, the anime, you saw the pig there as well. Moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about Arale's 2 friends, the Gachan. Now, the Gachan, otherwise known as Gajira no Ramaki, named after both Gamera and Godzilla, Gojira, was originally just one being, and at some point in Dr. Slump split into 2 beings. Senbei Norimaki found the Gachan egg on a time-traveling trip and it hatched. We later find out that the Gachan are actually angels, but remember, because this is a different continuity from Dragon Ball, these angels are not like the Whis and Vados angels. They are sent from God, who in Dr. Slump looks remarkably like Master Roshi, and Toriyama already admitted that he reused the design for Master Roshi, so it's no surprise there. They were sent down from God to basically prevent the extinction of mankind by stopping the technological advancements of mankind. So that's why you'll often see them chewing on things and destroying things just for the hell of it, because that's pretty much what they do. But of course, they have a relationship with Arale in the series and are kind of her sidekicks, I guess you can say. And Arale herself is an android created by Senbei Norimaki. I'm pretty sure most of you guys figured that out. Why is she so powerful? She just is, alright? She's a gag character. But more on these gag characters a little bit later on. So then we have King Nico-chan there. Now, King Nico-chan is basically the evil king of the Nikos, who are these aliens who come to Earth because they think that Earth is a weak planet and they want to take it over. Which kind of reminds me of Raditz. I mean, a little bit, who knows? But in Dr. Slump, the Gachan actually eat King Nico-chan's spaceship, thus leaving him stranded and never able to go home. Until later on in the series when they actually do go back to planet Nico-chan and Arale saves the day, but that's a whole other story. Then we're introduced to Midori Norimaki and Turbo Norimaki. Midori is Dr. Slump / Senbei's wife, who he meets in the series, and Turbo is their son. And if you want to talk about crazy power scaling, I've talked about this in the past. Turbo has reality warping telekinetic powers and is a super genius, but in the world of Dr. Slump, the baby will never age. It's kind of like how Bart Simpson's been 10 years old forever. Same thing with Dr. Slump. That baby is technically years older than Gohan. Meanwhile, in the series, it's still a baby. It's not supposed to make any sense, dude. Just go with it. In Dr. Slump, we actually find out that Midori was a princess from another planet, which I thought was very wacky. And what's interesting is, not only does she look like Lunch, but in the 1997 Dr. Slump remake animated series, she's a brunette. So, could be a little inside joke from Toei there. So, in the episode, Senbei's big invention was the Reality Machine number 2, and that's because the Reality Machine number 1 was already seen in Dr. Slump. What's interesting, though, is that in the 90s remake of Dr. Slump, and by the way, thanks to Herms for reminding me of this one, Arale uses the machine to bring... Okay, this is wacky. So in the 90s remake of Dr. Slump that came out in 97, it started after GT went off the air, Arale in that universe is a big fan of Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball is a manga in that universe, so she uses the machine to bring the Dragon Ball manga to life, and that results in a fight between Goku and Kid Buu with Senbei in the middle of it. It's like a black and white Goku and Kid Buu, which I thought was just fantastic as they're ripped right out of the manga. I love stuff like that, and yet what's really wacky is that Kid Goku himself appears in that 97 Dr. Slump anime as an actual character, not from the manga, so it doesn't make any sense. It's just supposed to be a wacky cartoon. I keep saying this, but people tend to take their Dragon Ball very seriously. This is Dr. Slump. It's not supposed to be anything but just wackiness, alright? Now, in the episode, Senbei's machine creates a magazine that says Sukebe, which Sukebe literally translates to dirty. Thank you to Herms for that one as well. And also, when he's getting his, I guess, award, he transforms into what's called his handsome form. So this is a gag in Dr. Slump where Senbei Noramaki's like this kind of fat, kind of pudgy looking scientist guy, but whenever he does something confident, like create something or accomplish something with Midori or something like that, he transforms into this like super handsome, rugged, stud. And I think this is awesome, awesome stuff because it's a reflection of who we are as people in the real world. Toriyama is a mastermind when it comes to doing this, and I know some people were kind of caught off guard in Dragon Ball Super episode 69 when he did this, but this is very common in Dr. Slump. Happens all the time. Then, of course, we have the ghost of Dr. Mashirito. Dr. Mashirito is the main villain of Dr. Slump, and he's also the creator of Obachaman, who's the little boy with the glasses from Dr. Slump, the other android, who actually winds up marrying Arale at one point in the series later on, so that's wacky, but basically Dr. Mashirito is a scientist who's converting his body into being a cyborg or an android. Sounds kind of like DBZ, just a little bit, except of course he's wacky and he has these wacky inventions as the series progresses and they get more and more wacky. And as I pointed out before, Dr. Mashirito is a joke character who was named after and inspired by Toriyama's first editor, Kazuhiko Torishima. If you look at the word Mashirito, Torishima, it's just the syllables reversed pretty much. And in the episode, we actually see Senbei checking a chapter of the manga to make sure this guy is actually, supposed to be dead or whatever, and the chapter he's checking is an actual manga volume that he's holding. It's the cover of Dr. Slump Manga Volume 16. So again, the Easter eggs in this episode are non-stop. And of course, the fact that he says over and over again, reject, 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 is a joke because Toriyama's first editor was notorious for rejecting his ideas over and over and over again. So Toriyama will always make fun of his peers. It's just something that he does. Moving forward, we get to the fight with Vegeta where he actually states in the series, this is absurd strength. She must be a gag comic character, in which she is because Arale is way too strong. And actually, based on this episode of Super, she's even stronger than we could even imagine, right? Well, that's not the first time Vegeta has said that or faced off against a gag character. A few years after Dragon Ball ended publication, Toriyama came out with a manga called Neko Majin Z, which I will do a video on eventually, where he complained about the fact that the Neko Majin is a gag character. He's way too strong. So, again, the creators of Dragon Ball Super are bringing up some obscure stuff to people outside of Japan, but if you're super hardcore or if you're in Japan, you'll recognize this stuff. I would assume. I'm sure there's still people over there who don't know. And like I mentioned in my Who is Arale video, Arale does indeed have the power to cut the earth in half. She can also fly to Jupiter in like seconds. She performs feats that make no sense when you apply real world science to it. But we gotta remember it's a cartoon. And her big technique is called the Nicha Cannon. The word Nicha is something that Arale constantly says in the series. Nicha is like short for konnichiwa, which is like hello. It's just something that she always says. It's just part of her character. And another part of her character is the fact that she has a weird obsession with, well, shit. She's always found with her stick poking the poo. And if you play Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, you'll see the poop stick there is actually one of the clothes you can add onto your character, which I thought was pretty cool. Nice little Easter egg there in Dragon Ball Xenoverse. But it's just something that Arale does. Another cameo that a lot of folks might now recognize is that of Kurinkinton Soramame, who is the barber of Penguin Village and the father of Taro and Pasuke. And it's funny because the barber's actually in the manga of Dragon Ball, but not the anime. They didn't adapt him for the anime back in the old crossover way back in the 80s, and I'm not really sure why. It's weird. And of course, the episode ends with Vegeta saying, "I'll never fight a gag comic character again," which is almost exactly what he said at the end of the Neko Majin Z cameo that Vegeta was in. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope that I enlighten you guys on Dr. Slump and some of the jokes from that episode, and I assure you that almost no other YouTuber who covers Dragon Ball will be doing anything like this. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you like this kind of stuff, subscribe, check out my Dragon Ball in-depth series so you can learn more about Toriyama, Dragon Ball, Dr. Slump, because one thing that we all have in common is that we love this shit, and I love all of you. I'll talk to you down the road.